Welcome to the Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmedeke, and today we are brought to you by Applewood Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. They have been serving Denver residents for 50 years. They are the proud sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche. And on this podcast, we are talking Denver Broncos as they get the win in LA over the Chargers 24-7. So I'm joined by Chris Thomason. Chris, how you feeling? I know you were dealing with some illness. How you doing?
Oh, doing fine, thanks.
That's good. So, all right, so let's talk about this Bronco game. Would you say probably the most complete win of the season for the Broncos?
Well, the Kansas City win was pretty darn good. Anytime you beat the defending champions 24-9, that's not too bad. But the fact that it was on the road certainly helps matters. And several of the players, including Josie Jewell, linebacker, said they put together a complete defensive performance. And that was on the heels of the previous week when they were brutal defensively in the first half against Houston and then strong in the second half. So, it turned out to be mostly a routine victory. I mean, the Chargers, strangely just kept going for it on fourth down in the first half, and they could have gotten a few field goals. And, once that happened, the Broncos took charge.
So let's talk about the defense because they were the story. So Justin Herbert goes out in the second quarter with it sounds like a broken finger. But even when he was in there, he was 9 for 17 and sacked 4 times. They were harassing Herbert just as much as they ended up harassing Easton Stick when he came in.
Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, they lost their starting quarterback, and that's why the Chargers lost the game. But Herbert was doing nothing at all special before he got hurt. I mean, he was missing some receivers, and he just didn't look like the same guy. And before he got hurt, and like you said, they had 6 sacks, and 4 of them were over Herbert, and he was knocked out late in the second quarter. So that wasn't the reason for the Chargers losing.
So like you said, 6 sacks, 6 different guys, and only one of them came from the defensive line and Zach Allen. The rest were linebackers and guys in the secondary. This seems to be Vance Joseph's style. And, as we continue the, reemergence of the redemption story of Vance Joseph, he is bringing blitzes, and it seems like it's at the right time. And it seems like it's guys that, the offenses are not expecting are coming off the edge.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing is guys are getting sacks from all over the place, especially the defensive backs. PJ Locke from the safety spot has had a sack in 3 consecutive games. Jaquan McMillan has had one in 2 straight games. Justin Simmons got one. Yeah, the pressure is coming from all over the place. And they have 11 sacks in the last 1.5 games because all 5 of their sacks against Houston came in the second half. So, that's definitely going to be something to watch against Detroit and Jared Goff this week.
So, I mean, I will say, I guess Baron Browning didn't get a sack on that play, but he did force that interception to Jonathan Cooper. So he was an edge rusher that was in on that play. The PJ Locke stuff is interesting. Like you said, 3 sacks. What do they do when Kareem Jackson comes back? Do they just play all 3 of them?
I mean, I think you have to play
Locke, right?
PJ Locke. I mean, I think when Jackson comes, assuming PJ Locke stays healthy, when Jackson comes back for his first game, you kind of paint it as, well, he's missed some time. He's got to get back in the groove. Well, Locke's playing, well. They can put Locke in. I don't think it's going to. If Locke starts against the Patriots on December 24th, which is Jackson's first game back, I don't think that's going to create any waves. And, if they keep winning and they're in a groove and Locke is playing well, I think you have to continue playing PJ Locke.
So you talked about Jaquan Macmillan, sorry, however you say it. The guy has a nose for the ball, and he seems to be a real playmaker. Have you ever kind of seen a slot corner that is just so, I guess Bronco fans could say Chris Harris back in the day, but he's just around the ball at all times, and he's a playmaker, and it's something the Broncos defense hasn't had for a while.
Yeah, he's all over the place, and his name has been botched by announcers throughout the season. They had a new one, the Chargers in-house PA announcer called him McKillen. So, which was good because he's kind of been killing foes. I mean, I mentioned sacks in 2 straight games. He's gotten several takeaways this year. Yeah, he's just been all over the place. Just has a knack for the ball, and he's been utterly pivotal. You know, a guy that was inactive for the first game of the season, barely played in the next 2, and then they throw him in the lineup after that disastrous 70-20 loss at Miami, and boom, he's so good that they just waive a Sane Bassie right after that.
So one more thing on the defense, and that's just, we've talked about Vance Joseph every week, but this has become a trend now where, I mean, this defense is performing as one of the best in the leagues. And I can't remember who had the quote about they are playing like the best. It was in your story. I think it was Josie Jewell who said that. And it seems like they are a physical group, and they are harassing people. Like they're just, even that bad first half in Houston, like they came back with a second half that was pretty dominant.
Actually, it was Adam Troutman, the tight end, who said
okay.
they're playing as good as any defense in the NFL right now. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the transition when we look back at the start of the season, and even after the Miami game. I mean, took some time for them to get their footing. The Bears kind of ran roughshod against them for much of the game. The Jets ran all over them and that sort of thing. It still took some time for them to get their footing, but it all kind of started in a loss, 19-8, October 12th at Kansas City. The defense looked surprisingly good. They lost the game, but it was a game that everybody thought they probably were going to be wiped out, and boom, everything has just started to kind of click since then.
Well, and not to poke the bear that is the Kansas City Chiefs, but the Chiefs haven't looked right since they lost in Denver here.
Yeah, that including that loss, they've lost 4 of their last 6. I mean, amazingly, they're 1 game ahead of Denver now in the AFC West. And Sean Payton brought that up Monday when I asked him about playoff scenarios. He said, well, we're thinking that we're 1 game out in the division, but it's going to be tough sledding, though. They're a game out, and the Chiefs are looking fairly good with the tiebreakers. So, they have to lose 1 game regardless to force a tie, but the division tiebreakers now, it's 3-1 Chiefs to 2-2 Broncos. So the Chiefs loss then most likely would have to be to the Chargers or to the Raiders, and I don't know if I see that happening.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. All right, let's flip to the other side of the ball. And Courtland Sutton has been just unbelievable this year. He's got 10 touchdown catches. It's kind of come to, it kind of shows now that Russell Wilson's like, oh, I'm just going to chuck the ball down there and see if Courtland Sutton can catch it. What have you seen from Courtland Sutton this season? Because, last year he was pretty slow coming back from that injury.
Well, for super old timers, it's almost like Y.A. Tittle and the alley-oop, throwing the ball up to R.C. Owens back in the 50s. I mean, just throw it up there and hope Sutton gets it. And yeah, I saw a stat on Next Gen Stats yesterday that he's had 5 touchdown catches this season that, according to Next Gen Stats, had less than a 30% catch probability. So yeah, he's just making crazy catches, and he's become undisputed the top receiver on the Broncos. I mean, everybody keeps waiting for Jerry Jeudy to break loose, and it never really seems to happen. And Courtland Sutton has become the guy.
I was going to bring up Jeudy next, because is there just a timing thing with Russell Wilson, or is it just the touchdown that should have been a touchdown one kind of, I think, drove a lot of people crazy, because that's just a simple toe tap that receivers do all the time. And he didn't really even make an effort to toe tap.
Yeah, he looked just routine. No, you're absolutely correct. And even on that long pass down the right sideline that was incomplete, he kind of just ran after the ball and didn't seem to have awareness of where the sideline was there. But yeah, the touchdown should have been a routine touchdown, and that could have been a key play because that could have made it 14-0 in halftime, and they had to settle for making it 10-0. As it turned out, the defense continued to stand up. Yeah, it's kind of odd because one would think also that defenders would maybe be paying a little bit more attention to Sutton, which would open things up more for Judy, but it hasn't happened. I mean, Judy hasn't had a big game in a long time.
So one last thing before we jump to Detroit, and I don't usually talk about punters on this podcast with you, but Riley Dixon was great on Sunday. He pinned the Chargers inside the 25 times, and he even got a shout out from Coach Sean Payton at the end of the game.
Yeah, he was solid. Wasn't all that good at Houston the week before, so he bounced back. He's been kind of up and down this year, but overall, I think they're thinking he's done a decent job this season.
So let's talk a little playoff picture first for the AFC. The Broncos still sit in ninth, technically, but there's a lot. Indy and Pittsburgh play each other before the Broncos on Saturday. Houston plays at Tennessee. We watched Tennessee beat Miami last night, so that's no easy game for Indy. What you think the Broncos are probably in pretty good shape, especially if they get the win in Detroit on Saturday night.
Yeah, that's a key one. I think ESPN Analytics has the Broncos as 38% chance to make the playoffs, but that's probably assuming they're probably not going to beat Detroit. If they beat Detroit, their playoff prospects will zoom. If they lose, not a good loss. But if you're going to lose at this juncture of the season, you want to lose to an NFC team because one of the things that's tough for them in the tiebreakers is they're 4-5 in the AFC in the conference. So that wouldn't affect their conference record. And if they lose to Detroit, but win their final 3 AFC games, then they're 7-5 in the conference, and that could help them from a tiebreaker situation.
So yeah, and the Bengals actually play before them on Saturday too. They host Minnesota at 11 a.m. on Saturday. So there's that. Buffalo is home for Dallas, who looks like one of the best teams in the NFC. So there's a Broncos win in Detroit would definitely would jump them up pretty nice with some of these other matchups. What are they getting in this Detroit team? Because early on they look like one of the best teams in the NFC. They've kind of struggled. They lost to the Bears. This Sunday they got blown out on Thanksgiving. So what are the Broncos getting in this Detroit team?
Yeah, they've been up and down lately, and they're a team that was last in the NFL in total defense last year. The defense is certainly much better this year, but occasionally the terrible defense will resurface for the Lions. So they can be scored upon. Just look at when they went into Baltimore a couple of weeks ago and were wiped out. So they can be scored upon if the Broncos offense is clicking. But I'm sure the Broncos will go back to the same formula. They're going to try to keep the ball on the ground, control the clock, but they've been more willing to open it up in recent games with deep passes, and certainly have had some success in that area. And if Russell Wilson gets 6 or 7 seconds to throw like he did in that 46-yard touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton, you can, score against anybody.
All right, Chris, thanks for coming on and talking about the Broncos game with me. I want to make sure everyone knows the Broncos play Saturday night this week. They play at 6:15 on NFL Network. Make sure you is it NFL Network? Am I wrong? Yeah, that's right.
You are correct.
Okay, I thought so.
It'll be shown locally on ABC Channel 7.
Oh, and locally on ABC as well. That's good to know. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple or Spotify. And Chris, we will catch up next week after the Detroit game. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks a lot.